Hi friends, host Eric here, talking with business people. I am very proud tonight to share with you a piece of work that I've been working on for a good solid week now, actually, here and there, bit by bit, and I finally finished it. And I think it provides what I'd like to see this channel do going forward, and where I think it's most useful, which is I'm in a relationship with a dual. I'm a big believer in this duality thing. I'm seeing it in action every day, and I decided to break down this particular dual relationship. I know it would play out very differently than the one I'm in. And I also know that it's not enough to be duals. You've got to get the right kind of dual, the right individual instance of that dual. And there are different reasons why one individual might be a better choice than another. If you're an ISTP male and you've got 6 ENFJ females lined up and you think they're all hot, well, which one should you choose? This document is going to answer that question. Now, I've provided for the purposes of this video 3 pages of the document I want to go over. I'm going to go over as quickly as I can without being thorough because there's a lot to go over. And it only represents the beginning of this exploration of these 2 types in this relationship. The full pull-out resource guide for ISTP ENFJ is available for purchase for $4.99 in the store, and I'll put a link at the end. Let's go forward without any further ado. No, they are duals. What does that mean in socionics? It means their 1-4s are reversed. So ISTP's got TI in the 1, ENFJ's got TI in 4, FE vice versa. And it means they're the same 2-3 in opposite orders. So ISTP goes SENI, ENFJ goes NISE in the 2-3. How does this play out differently than, say, perceiving DOMs, like me and Kimberly, versus these 2, Pierre and Liz? You may know Liz. She's a member of the community, and she's got a smoking hot studly ISTP lined up in the wings. His name is Pierre. He works in the maple syrup industry, of course. Anyway, they're both young. Are they too young for duality? Let's find out. Let's do a little bit of analysis here. So you'll see the side-by-side parameters, just basic things. ISTP, ENFJ, they're called LSI and EIE in socionics. That's logical sensory introvert and ethical intuitive extrovert. Note that the ISTP is FE seeking, the ENFJ is TI seeking. Note ISTP NE polar and the ENFJ SI polar. And what does this functionally mean for the ISTP? Their SI is going to be strong but unvalued. For the ENFJ, their NE is going to be strong but unvalued. And the course, the tool function each has is also going to be a significant factor in how this duality relationship plays out, because the ISTP follows through on the decided course as his tool function. Follow through is his tool function, whereas ENFJ's tool function is epistemological, knowing which is the best course to follow through on. There are obviously complementary tool functions. Whether or not a given ENFJ and ISTP can realize that duality magic, or whether they are subject to fracture lines, is the next page that I excerpted from the document for the purposes of this video. I'm not happy with where my microphone is, but oh well. Yeah, it has to be like this way. Yeah, there. Okay. So you'll see here, this is page like 5 or 6 from the document, but it's page 2 here because I excerpted it for the purposes of this video, as I indicated. The fracture lines. When duals go bad. While dual relationships are generally stable, and not all of them work, and not all of them last. The judging types have a rougher go of things in this regard, so that includes ENFJ and ISTP. Remember, don't get fooled by that P on the end of the MBTI letterings. ISTP is a judger through and through. They have TI as the dominant function. So your ENFJ, ISTP, and ESFJ, INTP pairings, although we're not covering that in this topic, will be more likely to endure than TEFI pairings. So that's a good news for LSI and EIE, is those 2 types are likely to be dualities that work more so than, say, ESTJ and INFP, although less so than, say, ENTP and ISFJ. That's my opinion about that. But I do think that ISTP ENFJ is a great candidate for duality. They're not an exception, and there are some, and we'll get into that in later videos. But all right, so let's see where the disputes can be, though. The fracture lines. Intuitive versus sensory. That's a key fracture line in any duality relationship. The dispute area between duals can be boiled down to an intuitive-sensor division. Intuitives prioritize meaning and meaning-making over experience when evaluating things in terms of significance. For sensors, it's the exact opposite. So even if you guys agree wholeheartedly on a given position, you may disagree as to why you affirm it. And that actually can cause some disputes because it's not enough for a lot of meaning makers that you agree with them. You have to agree with them for the right reason, or they're going to get fussy. Now, as an ENTP, I get fussy about meaning making. In this LSI-EIE relationship, even though the intuitive is the ENFJ, I think it's likely to be the LSI who gets fussy sometimes about the meaning making because LSI is so attached to this consistency metric that is his nature, TI. Okay, so note that the dual relationships can be either stabilizing or unstabilizing dependent on a number of factors. Whether or not Liz and Pierre will express the stabilizing or destabilizing aspects of the ISTP ENFJ pairing will depend on individual differences that can be attributed to subtype as informed by the nurture-based habits of attention, including expression. So, subtype I'm attributing here, at least, to nurture-based factors. What it basically says is, if ISTP is going to prioritize the real-time or existential or experiential aspect of TI, then he won't be adequately prioritizing the metaphysical aspect of it, and then you'd run afoul. But that's covered in more depth elsewhere. But the gist of it is whether or not each of these individuals manifests their respective function in real time, or whether they approximate it for the purpose of determining statuses and having a relativist approach like that. Okay, FE and TI. As an FE dom, Liz, the ENFJ, tends to express positives in terms of what she wants and tends to express negatives in terms of what is good or bad or moral. In contrast, the ISTP tends to express positives in terms of what he wants and negatives in terms of wrongness or imperatives. So, the difference there being that they both understand positive things in terms of what they want, but they don't understand negative things in terms of the same degree of absoluteness. ENFJ views the moral issues as being adjudicated solely through the feelings of other individuals. With 4-slot TI, that's tough for her to overcome. ISTP, on the other hand, can be a little bit rigid about the logical constraints with which he's willing to consider legitimacy, and that can be a source of difficulty. Now, here you'll see I break down exactly how the actual mechanism works. The actual correlation here is not between meow and meow. It's between outcome orientation, as opposed to process orientation, and increased risk of a dual relationship fracturing. The correlation is not one that describes the relationship between the dominant judging function and fracturing directly, but outcome orientation will correlate strongly with the dominant judging function, extroverted J's and introverted P's in MBTI. And this is so because a results orientation correlates with a real-time expression of a judging function, while a process orientation correlates with a cross-time expression of a judging function. So in other words, a real-time expression is experiential, a process orientation is approximatory, and it's instantiation, instances. You render experience into finite defined instances so that you can do quantification work on it, like instantiation versus universalization versus existentialization. Okay, so, but there's an exception here. INTPs and INFPs may prove the exception to this description of the fracture line mechanism because metaphysical action is their creative function and must render the reference, actions, reactions, and environmental rules into symbols before any but reflexive physical action can be accomplished at all. And since INTPs and INFPs both have SE in the 7th slot, what that means is they basically don't have a direct route to physical action. They needed to travel through metaphysical approximation first. That's not the case with ISTPs, though. So I put that note in there to draw the contrast so you better understand the ISTP. It's articulated further elsewhere. And then the last thing on this brief chart here is still, regardless the instrumental, instrumental or absolute valuing pattern between the various subtypes is likely to be a voter here. Regardless, the resolution of the process results distinction as it plays out is either complementary or conflicting. make sure you get one that's complementary and not conflicting. If it is conflicting, dual relations have enough redundancies in them, you can still get over it, but you'd rather have one that's complementary. I actually think mine is conflicting in this area here. But it's okay because, first of all, I've metacognated the fuck out of everything. And second of all, it's just like one little thing. So it's easy squeezy because we just roll right through that with a little dual magic. Anyway, the last thing I included here in this brief excerpt of an excerpt, basically, excerpt of the standalone document, the reference guide, is this neat and handy intersystem slot table. It tells you what the slots are and what they do according to different systems. So the MBTI slot numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 you see there. The moistly taxed slot job. Your first slot, according to my taxonomy, is meta framework. Your second slot is behavioral. Your third slot is scoring. Your fourth slot is lack. Your fifth slot is friend. Your sixth slot is foe. Your seventh slot is ineffable, unknowable. And your eighth slot is automatic. In terms of how they express according to Moistley taxonomy, number 1 is an open frame. Number 2 is an open process. Number 3 is closed process. Number 4 is closed frame. Number 5 is good value. Number 6 is bad value. Number 7 is blind bad. And number 8 is blind good. What do I mean by this? Well, the first function is the framework for your open systems manifestation of identity. That means you can act upon the frames that comprise your identity as you're experiencing them and as you're living them. That's what it means to be immersed in your cognitive function as a dominant function, to be NE rather than to be somebody using NE. And if in fact you are using your dominant function actively in that capacity, then you need to use it almost purposelessly, because as soon as you start to utilize it, you naturally are going to go to one of the evaluatory metrics that you use in conjunction with it. Okay, so behavioral, 2, that's your tool function. Scorecard, well, the processes, right. So your process functions are ones that you don't use both on a real-time and an approximation level, because you're not able to render it into symbolic representations that function within the system adequately in order to justify devoting the attention to it. So that's why 2 is open process and not framing. That's why 3 is closed process, which means it works beautifully as long as we pretend humans don't have framing capacities. And then 4, closed framework, which means you can only succeed in your fourth function under your own framework. You're never going to win under anybody else's framework on the fourth function. In your fifth function, it's the value you claim to be good. Sixth function is the value you claim to be bad. The seventh function is that which is bad and not unmentioned. And the eighth function is that which is good and unmentioned. And this is a pretty good distinction here as we frame these things through an argumentation framework. We better understand that's what ontology is. It's existential arguments. Okay, MBTI names. Remember, 1 is dominant, 2 creative, 3 is tertiary, 4 is auxiliary, 5, 6, 7, 8 are all shadow functions, according to MBTI. Socionics blocks. 1 and... what? That's not right. 1 and 2 are ego. 3 and 4 are super ego. 7 and 8 are id. 5 and 6 are... yeah, I don't know. I fucked that one up. I gotta fix that. I'll fix that before I publish this. Anyway, note this. The names for the slots in socionics: base, tool, mobilizing, subjective, ignoring, demonstrative, polar, and role. Note that for each of these functions, there's a status that MBTI affords. It's implicit. It's not stated directly, but basically it's saying 1 is your nature, 2 is your action, 3 is your purpose, 4 is your seeking. And then 5, 6, 7, 8, they just don't address it. Unconscious, 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 unconscious. Socionics block status. Your first function is strong. Your second function is weak. Your third function is strong. Fourth function, weak. Fifth function is strong. Fifth function is weak. Sixth function is strong. Seventh function is weak. Eighth function is strong. They both basically alternate, except they go weak, weak for 4, 5. Okay. And then the BB name. That's this guy who worked out the archetypal model from Jung, who liked the character archetypes as a mechanism for understanding this. Your first function is the hero function. Second is the good parent. Third function is your child. Fourth function is your animal. Fifth function is anti-hero, according to this guy, basically. Although I would say ally. Sixth function is foe or witch. Seventh function is the trickster. Don't trust your goddamn introverted feelings if you're an ENTP, because they do stupid ass shit. And your last one is the demon. He acts sometimes on your behalf, sometimes not. You can't really trust him. It's kind of random. It's unconscious. That's all the time I have to go over this, but I want to show you real quick. If you want to see this whole document, and you want to get this, it is well worth purchasing. I will show you what it looks like right now. I put a lot of time and energy into it, and I put a lot of thought into it as well to make sure it's useful for people who are of these types. You can see it's formatted for colorful consumption of data, and there's a lot of data here and a lot of good information. There are prompts and frames for typing people that you think might be candidates. There is a slot breakdown for each of the two types, ISTP and ENFJ. There is flags. If you're a female ENFJ, there's a page just devoted towards red flags, green flags for male ISTPs. That can be extremely useful. And then, best of all, is going to explain to you what are the stabilizing functions, what are the moisture intensifiers, the things that can make your relationship very intense, can either make it also stable or unstable. And that's a key thing that's discussed here as well. I hope you guys get a chance of buying this. And if you don't like it, you won't get your money back, but you will get a shamefaced apology from me if you ask in the room when I'm there. Thanks for watching Talking with Famous People. And listen, I've got something new I want to tell you, okay? Because I've been thinking about it for a long time now. I've been looking at you, I've been gazing at you in awe and wonder, viewer. And I just want to tell you, me and Kimberly both, we absolutely love you. We do. We absolutely love you. And we want you to know that. Thanks for watching, and thanks for buying this wonderful document from the store. Link is in the description.